Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Jordan Roberts. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to our online worship service, hopefully one of our very last ones, where we come together even though we are apart. Worship is highly collaborative, and this morning I am joined by all of the members of the worship team who are helping us, and of course by all of you. This service will be recorded and later put on YouTube. 3 things about how we use Zoom. Please display your name and pronouns that you would like so that we can greet you in the way that feels most comfortable. While we mostly have everyone muted during the service, there will be times when you will be invited to unmute and join in unison reading or chalice lighting, and please participate as you wish at that time. We use the chat box for reading, song lyrics, important announcements, and so be sure to keep this open so you can follow along.
Let us worship.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad, I'm so glad, I am so glad, I am so glad, so glad.
Thank you, Lisa and Rick. We would like to extend an especially warm welcome to all those who are here for the first time. We are so glad you're here. Our greeter is dropping our connection card in the chat box if you'd like to complete that and connect with our community. This caring, supportive community has a pastoral care committee who works closely with our minister to provide support, care, and a listening ear. Please fill out the pastoral care card being dropped in the chat box if you would like the care team and/or Reverend Laura to reach out to you. There is also a link on our website. Our online services are intergenerational, and we have a religious exploration program whose director, Rebecca Britt, is happy to hear from you. Her email is in the chat box now. There's a lot happening at SVUUS, and the Happenings Weekly newsletter is a concise, up-to-the-minute way of staying connected. Lori Quigley's email is now in the chat box if you'd like to reach out to her to receive the happenings. We're also active on Facebook and have an event calendar on our website. Some special announcements. Next Sunday, June 20th, we'll be having our outdoor worship service here on site at South Valley. Services will start an hour earlier at 9:30 a.m. so that we can beat the heat. We will have plenty of cold water and shade to help make the Utah sun more manageable. And music will be provided by our local jam band. Masks will be required at this event. So please bring your own lawn chair and sunscreen. Again, next Sunday, 9:30 a.m. here at the church. We have a special announcement to share about our music program. This August, we'll be welcoming John Allen as our new music director. John comes to us with a strong musical background and a joyful heart. He's very much looking forward to meeting us all soon. Details on a welcoming potluck with the choir will be announced later this summer. Super excited about that. All right, we will now share and take a moment to share the warmth of community. We will say hello to one another and then say our chalice lighting words together. They will be in the chat box. If you have a candle or a chalice, please light them at home and say these words that we will put up in a moment. So please first unmute yourselves and greet one another verbally and or in the chat box.
Hello, everyone.
Morning, everybody.
Hi, good
Hi.
morning.
Good
Bye.
morning.
Good to see everyone.
Hello.
So, let us light our chalices. We invite you to stand in body, mind, or spirit as we say our chalice lighting words together. And you can participate using the actions if you wish. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action.
Joyous morning. I'm Sophia Hostingi, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at South Valley UU Society. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and sometimes they. Come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here, whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes, you are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society.
Having a little bit of technical stuff going on here in the sanctuary this morning. So good morning. I'm the Reverend Laura Young, and my pronouns are she and her. It is good to be together on this hot Utah summer morning. I hope that you all will take extra time to drink extra water today and to try to enjoy yourselves as much as you can as we head into what is sure to be a very hot week. This morning, we're taking some time to delve deeper into our anti-racism work here at South Valley. And the lens that we're going to be looking at is through the experience of Black joy. And I want to be very upfront and honest that these are voices that are not my own, and that we undertake this work in allyship with the Black community. And we'll be talking a little bit more in the coming months about what it truly means to become an anti-racist community. And so this is an attempt to begin that conversation and that narrative, not solely from the place of trauma, but also from the experience of joy. Because joy is a birthright experience for all of humanity. So our call to worship this morning comes from one of our most beloved African-American artists in the United States, Maya Angelou. So here is her rendition of Still I Rise.
Others gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss or disappointment. And yet each of us has awakened, arisen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you? Fine, thanks, and you?" It's amazing. Wherever that abides in the human being, there is the nobleness of the human spirit. Despite it all, Black and white, Asian, Spanish, Native American, pretty, plain, thin, fat, vowed or celibate, we rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just 'cause I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just 'cause I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh, does it come as a surprise that I dance? As if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs. Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, naturally, there I go rising.
So, you took my math class and learned to make egg toast.
So I'd like to now invite us all to sing together our opening hymn, When the Spirit Says Do, performed by Lisi and Rick Nobis on the piano.
Got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, Spirit says do. 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 You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you've got to sing. Oh Lord, you've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you've got to dance, oh Lord. You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. 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 You've got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You've got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. Oh, when the Spirit says laugh, you better laugh, oh Lord. You've got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. 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 Do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. Oh, when the Spirit says do, you've got to do. Oh Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
I'm getting notes of bubblegum and cotton candy. Dear Nat and Moby, can you tell us about Juneteenth? From Miss Safford's class. Sure. Juneteenth is short for June 19th. On that date in 1865, enslaved people in Galveston Bay, Texas learned they were free. 2,000 Union troops showed up with the news. The Civil War was over, and so was slavery in the South. The news had taken a while to reach Texas, the westernmost state in the Confederacy. Juneteenth celebrates that day, when the last enslaved people in the South were set free. The Emancipation Proclamation had made it official. That was an executive order issued by Abraham Lincoln in the middle of the Civil War. It said that all enslaved people in the states in rebellion against the United States shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. Meaning, it applied to the Confederate states, but not to the slave states that stayed in the Union. That's because Lincoln wanted to keep his allies in those states happy. Slavery continued there for months after the Civil War ended. The 13th Amendment outlawed it across the land in December 1865, a half year after Juneteenth. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was still a big step forward. For one thing, it allowed Black men to enlist in the Union military. Nearly 200,000 Black troops went on to fight for the freedom of their brothers and sisters. But more importantly, it placed the Union squarely on the side of freedom, which meant enslaved people could escape across Union lines, and 500,000 of them did. Every Union victory brought an expansion of freedom. In each area of the Confederacy it conquered, enslaved people were freed. But as Union troops advanced, lots of slaveholders took their operations west. Many found refuge in a place far from the fighting, Texas. Until Major General Gordon Granger came to Galveston on Juneteenth. Standing on the balcony of the Confederate headquarters, he read from General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Newly freed people danced, cried, sang, and started to make plans. Word spread quickly across Texas. 7-year-old Molly Harrell was enslaved on a plantation over 200 miles north of Galveston. She said, "Me and my mother left right off. We all walked down the road singing and shouting." If only it were that easy. Many white Southerners refused to accept Black people as their equals. The most hateful began a campaign of terror, attacking and killing Black people across the South. Defying these threats, Black Texans observed the first anniversary of Juneteenth. Back then, it was also called Emancipation Day or Jubilee Day. They sang spirituals, ate barbecue, played games, and recited the Emancipation Proclamation, even though the threat of violence was always there. The country passed several constitutional amendments to protect the rights of Black Americans. But down south, state and local authorities refused to obey these laws. Instead, they did everything they could to make Black people second-class citizens. First, Black Southerners were prevented from voting, so they had no influence in government. Then, laws were passed to bar Black people from participating in everyday life. They couldn't eat with white people, go to the same schools, or use the same water fountains. Black citizens had to live in separate neighborhoods and could only hold lower-paying jobs. And they had to treat white people like they were superior. Try to fight it, and you risked jail time, violence, and even death. This policy of segregation or separation lasted for 100 years. Still, Juneteenth persevered. Celebrating became an act of resistance and a show of strength, and Black communities got creative about making celebrations possible. Because of segregation, many public parks were off limits to Black Texans, so they sometimes pooled funds to purchase their own land. In Houston, in 1872, ministers raised money to buy 10 acres, creating Emancipation Park. It became a safe place to gather on Juneteenth for decades. Smaller celebrations were held in people's homes and in churches, too. Juneteenth slowly spread through the country beginning in the 1910s. That was the start of the Great Migration, when millions of Black Southerners sought a better life in the North. As people from Texas joined the migration, the holiday went with them. Then, during the 1950s and 60s, Juneteenth got even bigger. Black people connected their fight for equal rights to the fight to end slavery. Juneteenth embodied all of the pain and triumph of their shared history. Celebrations now featured parades and fireworks, street fairs and rodeos, and presentations about Black heritage. Red food and red drinks symbolized the blood of the enslaved and their resilience in bondage. And in 1980, Texas declared Juneteenth a state holiday. Since then, 47 states have recognized it as a holiday or day of observance. Yeah, there's recently been a push to make it a federal holiday. That's when government workers get a paid day off, and most everyone else does too, like we have for Independence Day. In fact, some people think of Juneteenth as America's second Independence Day. 'Cause the 4th of July only commemorates when white Americans gained independence, while Juneteenth is about when all Americans became free. Making it a federal holiday may not seem like such a big deal, But what a country chooses to honor and celebrate speaks to its core values. And freedom and equality for everyone are values I think we can all get behind. Nice, you baked a Juneteenth cake. We're not supposed to use actual red velvet. Blech.
This community, our church and its many ministries, are only made possible by the gifts you give of your time, your talents, and your treasure. Many of you pledge monthly to support our work, and for this we are very, very grateful. Your gifts help to ensure that we are able to live our values of justice in the world outside. We use Breeze to collect Sunday worship offerings online, and the link is in the chat box now. Part of our ministry at South Valley includes sharing our Sunday worship offering with a charitable organization that aligns with our principles and values. Your gift today will support the work of South Valley or of Encircle. Encircle was started in 2016 to help LGBTQ+ youth survive homophobia in the predominantly Mormon communities of Utah and to help Mormons become more accepting of LGBTQ+ people. Encircle has locations in Provo, Salt Lake, St. George, and soon in Heber, and provides support and counseling to over 900 people each month. As a decidedly LGBTQ+ affirming congregation, we wholeheartedly support the work of Encircle. Please give generously. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together, we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a mountain. I've got joy like a mountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. Yes, I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
For all that we have found the courage to give, may these gifts be a blessing. May these gifts be a blessing to South Valley and to Encircle. At this time, the congregation is invited to share their personal joys and sorrows in a communal ritual of compassion with one another. You're invited to enter into the chat box. May it be so. Amen. And now a reading or a video. I'll let our Zoom runners share their screen.
This poem is about joy. It's not about water remnants, evaporation, or sand, or thirst, or dry fruit, or hinges, or being hung today. No one died on the sidewalk, in the street, in the hands of a police officer or guard today. A little boy can play outside and be a child with a full imagination today. The only time he was asked to put his hands up was to show us how he looks when he pretends he's flying today. A black woman could smoke a cigarette, could laugh, could do whatever the fuck she wanted to do with her hair. No one called me a nigger today, blatantly or indirectly today. They remembered my name today. It sounded like joy no matter who said it today. Being black was not a reason to die by its natural causes. What I mean is, no one tried to kill me today. No one black or dark skin or the wrong shade died today. The only time we were made to come inside was to gather and tell stories. Remember when every day was a funeral, a sad song and a eulogy. Oh, but today, The only time we were made to come inside was when we rejoiced. The only hashtag we used today was joy. The handkerchiefs only wanted to feel the faces of the ones who cried with joy. This poem is about joy. It's not about fear or anger or sadness. Them emotions come to us too easy. It's not about glass or porcelain or fragile things or being broken or how many times or how long we gotta work for it. This poem is about joy. How long it stayed, how we remember it in us, always.
Finally, or so it seems possible to once again craft a worship service on purpose and in advance and have the world stay stable just long enough to allow me to not have to rewrite on a Saturday night. Finally, it seems that the pandemic is lifting a bit and we are once again able to fill our cups from sources other than a Zoom call, a mental health walk, and baking of bread. And finally, it seems possible to imagine a time when this too shall have passed. It isn't yet, of course, but it seems somehow more reasonable to hope so. I say this knowing full well that it is also completely irrational and unreasonable to say any such thing. The world is still very much in turmoil. As COVID rages in India and we face tremendous challenges with global warming and climate change, and the political divisions of this country remain pressing and distressing. And even as this week we marked the 53rd anniversary of Loving Day, the day when it became legal for interracial couples to marry, that it has only been 53 years rather than 5,300 years is a reminder of just how far we have yet to go. And yet we celebrate this day nonetheless as an important victory along the road to the beloved community. Hope is impractical. But that is kind of the point. It is an audacious response to the difficulty that lies at the heart of this world. It says, hope says, I am not done yet. It is the fighting, rising, resilient spirit of the human being that refuses to take no for an answer when the problem is complex, and they're always complex. And hope is a ridiculous claim that the world will not define me or you or us ever fully. Hope is impractical, and so is its companion, joy. We have spoken a lot about hope and joy this year, mostly as a means of surviving the impossible conditions that we have found ourselves in these last 16 months. Because joy and hope are essential tools along the journey through adversity, because they do that work of reminding us that this too shall pass. However, just as sex is not only for the purposes of reproduction, joy and hope are also not restricted to their practical, biological, utilitarian purposes. Joy and hope, and yes, sex, I've now said it twice in the same paragraph and the same sermon. These states of being are part of what makes us human and are therefore birthright experiences. They are essential and good on their own, and we ought not to have to explain ourselves so much about these things. For the African American community, their experiences of joy are often threaded through the lens of trauma And it can be difficult, if not downright impossible, for a Black artist to present joy without qualification. And this is often not because they themselves feel the need to apply this lens. It is rather that white folks expect Black folks to explain joy rather than just express it. White supremacy culture often seeks to exclusively define the Black experience through the lens of trauma, loss, and pain. And it is this aspect of exclusivity and expectation that I hope to lift up in today's worship. It is not up to me to speak of the Black experience directly. As a white cisgendered person, my role is rather to notice that when my worship team member Zach challenged me a few months back ago about tackling anti-racism by flipping the narrative of Black trauma to one of Black joy as a path to liberation, I did not know what to say. I've studied and I have reflected on anti-racism for the better part of a decade. And yet, here was a layer of inquiry I had overlooked. My privilege had allowed me to overlook this critical aspect of our American culture. In my ongoing quest to decolonize my mind and shake white supremacy out of my system, or at least widen the circle a bit more, I was struck by how little time I had spent truly contemplating what it means to be joyful from within the African experience on its own. So I invite you to journey with me and to consider for a moment what it might be to observe Black joy, not through the lens of trauma and loss and pain, but just on its own. Lex Scott of Black Lives Matter Utah has said many times in her allyship training that the practice of centering the Black experience is critical. And if it feels unfamiliar or you're not sure how to do that as an ally, it might be helpful to imagine yourself attending a party that you were not invited to. To imagine that you are attending a party that you were not invited to. You're not there as a guest. You're not there as a consumer. You are there as an observer. And your role is to act accordingly. You are at the party, but you were not invited. You can stay here now, but do not forget that you are an outsider. So I'm going to share a couple of videos with you this morning and invite you to practice that type of allyship. The first one is by Erenison Okoje, who speaks to what Black joy is and what the impact is of centering Black joy with the following video clip. Just give me a moment to share my screen with you.
I'm an author. In my humble opinion, Black joy should be embedded within the fabric of our culture and shouldn't just be temporary or fleeting. So Black joy is expanding the notion of what Black artistry is, and it's contributing to the culture, it's shaping what conversations we have, it's being completely free and unencumbered in terms of ideas and having absolute agency. And I think being your most authentic self, because sometimes it can be difficult operating within the Western structure in terms of how we express ourselves as artists and how we celebrate our culture. If I were to give concrete examples of what Black joy means to me, I would say it's reading a June Jordan poem, it's watching a Barry Jenkins film, it's listening to a Fela Kuti record on a hot day, it's looking at an image of a Basquiat exhibition. All of these things represent Black artistry and Black innovation and the complete freedom and joy that I think is important as an artist. There's so much happening that signifies Black joy at the moment. We're seeing our stories filter into the mainstream, and finally this idea of whose story is valuable is coming to the forefront, and Black stories are taking precedence, not only coming to the forefront, but shaping cultural narratives and having a really huge impact. So if we look at
becoming an anti-racist is hard. Because becoming anti-racist, which is what I propose that we are engaged in, not just in this community, but as a denomination and as a nation, becoming anti-racist is difficult because it's not a single point of arrival or even an accumulation of arrivals. Becoming anti-racist is a process. Dr. Ibrahim Kendi, in his book, How to Be Anti-Racist, speaks to this process as a stance that we take in response to an oppressive system that sorts people by the color of their skin. He writes, the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it. And part of this work, part of the work that we are engaged in as a community is to notice not just what we are thinking, but how automatic it is. And then once we notice that, to slow down, to breathe, and to try and see if we can make a different set of choices the next time. I am challenging myself to do this, and I invite you to do the same. But when I realized just how little I understood and how much I want to understand, my whole approach shifted. Describing and identifying behaviors, policies, and attitudes that center whiteness at the exclusion of any other experience promotes and protects the continuation of a system that codifies, blames, limits, mains, and kills people whose skin color is not that of very, very light. And we must be able to describe what is happening if we are ever to hope to dismantle or to shift it. For too long, we have equated calling someone a racist with a pejorative term. We've considered that to be someone who is a terrible person. But Dr. Kendi would have us cease to use the term racist pejoratively, and instead to use it descriptively, to help describe what is happening for the purposes of changing what is happening. And when it comes to understanding our roles in this work, that shift is critical. When someone, or a group of someone's, or a congregation of someone's, adopt a stance of becoming anti-racist, they accept that they will make mistakes, and that these mistakes are critical to the learning process. We have all been socialized by the culture that surrounds us, and learning to see the culture, that language, the attitudes, beliefs, the understandings, the expectations, the assumptions that lead to the creation of practices and policies is the work of bending the arc towards justice. This next church year, as we undertake the task to study the 8th principle for adoption as a congregation and as a denomination, we will be engaged in these types of conversations. And the outcome and the goal and the hope is not a single point of arrival or a single set of understandings. It is to open up the conversation and to invite everyone to be part of the circle. But we can only all be part of the circle if we recognize where the boundaries of that circle currently are, and if we do our best to try to widen it a little bit more. Being anti-racist is no more of a fixed status than is being LGBTQ friendly or anti-sexist or even pro-democracy. Each of those states, along with anti-racism, is a commitment we make. in order to create a more just, sustainable, and compassion-filled world. It is a stance of activity, a state of beingness that is full and resplendent and, yes, joyful in and of itself. So I hope to invite you in this moment to consider, and in the months to come, to consider and to invite and to investigate what it might mean for South Valley to adopt a stance of anti-racism collectively, so that our circle can be ever wider still. And this process doesn't have to be dreary and trauma-laden and difficult every single step of the way. Part of it certainly is. For undoing patterns of thinking requires confronting difficult, uncomfortable truths. But difficulty is not the whole of the story, and it won't be for you, for me, or for this community. The journey and the story can and will also be inclusive of new insight, opportunity through reflection, celebration, and joy. For liberation from suffering always results in the unleashing of new energy for action that can then be used to build the common good, and again, to widen the circle and to make our collective liberation that much more possible. That is the work we are engaged in as a community, and that is the invitation. Consider it your homework for Sabbath this summer. I will leave you with a video that I came across this week that is just delightful. Spoken and written from the voices of Black trans queer folk. It is entitled, "Joy is Our Birthright."
Wow, look at this. 94% of people believe company culture is important.
What is joy?
Tastes like? I never thought about that before. But maybe it tastes like Sour Patch Kids. Like
I feel like the smell of joy is like, not to be weird, but kind of like the smell of other people. Like, I don't know, people smell is joy. You know, and you get a good sniff of someone's like collar or someone's kind of like that you care about. It's like BO, like mild BO, not aggressive BO.
How do I describe joy? It's any moment that I can find to feel good and free.
I would just define joy as the feeling of taking a breath and letting go and being one with yourself and in your own body.
I would define joy as a revolutionary act. I really like the word joy, and I think that it carries so much more weight and power than just happiness.
I think if I could eliminate all of the barriers of racism or homophobia, or etc., my ideal career would probably still be within the same realm of helping people.
I would be naked all the time. Honestly, I would be naked. I would just be out here, just I could not, honestly, I don't know why naked is the first thing. I think it's just like the idea of just being like, there are no rules. Like that there's no one I have to impress.
A joyful moment for me, the first one that comes to mind is eating a mango. And it happened last summer, working here in Ottawa, and I just felt dull. I felt gray, and I just remember taking this really ripe mango, and instead of just like going to the space where everyone eats and cutting it, I just like intentionally went outside and just ripped this mango apart and just ate it in the middle of the street, and mango juice was flying. and I just didn't care at all who was watching, what anyone was going to say. And it was a really, really great moment. I found myself trying to capture that moment in other areas and ways of life.
For me, a really joyful moment I had was last year at Blockorama at Toronto Pride. I just remember I was in like such a good mood. I was with like 4 or 5 of my other Black homies, and like everybody was just having a good time. Like everybody was stunning, looked so good. The music was great. You know, I was shaking my ass. Like, you know, like we were just having a good time. We were having so much fun. And I just like seeing all these Black people, especially queer and trans Black people, like, because I think for a long time I struggled a lot with my gender. I struggled a lot with my sexuality and feeling like I could never belong in Black spaces. But I'm like, that shit's not true. I'm like, that's just colonialism. And so being able to, be in that space, like just like outside, listening to good music, having fun, Black people looking good, smelling fresh, looking cute, drip too hard, that like just so much. Even just thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, I'm in a good mood again.
I just remember the time that my mom told me she got her G1. I was just overjoyed, and it felt like a really simple thing if I were to explain it to other people, but for me and for my family it was a huge thing.
I would say filming this right now was a really joyful moment for me. It can feel uncomfortable to talk into a camera and to be around a crew, but at the same time it just brings me so much joy to know that there's a Black queer person listening to this and that we can see ourselves reflected in the content that we're consuming online.
I would say Black people, food, and sex. Those are like probably the 3 things. I was gonna go between sex and weed, because that too.
Ackee and selfish. I just let everyone know I'm Jamaican, so that's a huge one for me.
Chocolate. I love chocolate so much. And I know this, like, I might get hate for this, but I want milk chocolate. I don't like dark chocolate that much. I don't like white chocolate that much. I want like milk chocolate.
Smoking weed in parks. And I don't know, can I say like sharing food again? I just really like sharing food. Like sharing food is it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lawrenceville Bicentennial Podcast. I'm Nate McGill from Gwinnett Magazine, your host.
Let us have our last and final hymn together, performed again by Lisi and Rick. It is, what is the name of the song? Fire of Commitment. That's what it is.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith's and freedom fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion tune to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, when our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song bold, brave, and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets the mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on a
Once again, we're so thankful for Lacey and Rick for the beautiful music today and for all of you. Let us now extinguish our communal chalice. You're invited to unmute yourselves and say our chalice extinguishing words together. We have put the words in the chat box if you'd like to follow along. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of community, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts. Until we meet again.
Next Sunday.
What's next? It's an outdoor service. We're going to be together outdoors. At the church? Oh. And you're welcome to come if you want. Their Father's Day? Father's Day. Yeah.
When Jesus washed, he washed my sins away. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. When Jesus washed, oh, when he washed, when Jesus washed my sins away. Oh, happy day. He taught me how to watch, fight and pray, fight and pray. Oh, happy day, oh, happy day, when Jesus washed, when he washed, Jesus washed my sins away. Happy day. Oh, to watch, fight and pray, fight and pray, and live rejoicing every day, every day. Happy day, oh, happy day.
What a delightful and joyful day this has become, and hopefully will continue to be. Our time of worship is at a close, but our work is truly yet to begin. As you go forth from this day, may you find that there are moments of joy that arrive on your doorstep unexpectedly and delight you each and every step of the way. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back for social time in about 10 minutes.